Welcome everyone. We are very glad to have you join us today for the third program in our Need to Know series, Demystifying the Interview Process. My name is Meg Wager, and I'm an Associate Director here in the Career and Professional Development Center, and I'll be moderating today's program. Our goal during this hour is to really take a look at the overall interview process, review the objective of the interviewer and the candidate, and discuss how to best prepare for the interview and what to expect following the interview process. So a few quick housekeeping items to mention here. The program is being recorded so that students who are unable to attend will be able to get this great information at a later date. And I also encourage you to use the chat or the raise your virtual hand feature if you have any questions along the way. So our guest speakers for today's program come to us from the law firm of Phillips Lytle. I would like to extend a warm welcome to Sandra Langs, Human Resources and Professional Development Director in the New York City office for the firm, and Jeffrey Schwartz, Albany Law School class of '95, lateral recruitment partner and Albany office leader, who have graciously offered to share their insights with us today on the interview process to help you get ready for the summer interview season. They're a terrific team to be addressing the topics today. Phillips Lytle is participating in the virtual interview program in July and will be accepting applications from second and third year students for 2023 summer associate and associate positions. So we encourage you to take a look at their schedule request when it opens up for you on the 6th of July. So one of the more current pieces of information that we learned was that on June 1st, it was announced that the firm's practices and attorneys received highest distinctions from Chambers USA in the 2022 rankings. The Chambers Guide ranks the top lawyers and law firms across the USA. So congratulations. Sandy and Jeff, I'd like to give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves and give us a little brief summary about your backgrounds. And Sandra, let's start with you.
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Sandra Langs. I am the Director of Professional Development and Human Resources here at Phillips Lytle. I am an attorney, a practicing attorney for many decades in both litigation and employment law. And in 2008, I came to the firm to really focus on some things within the profession that were of particular interest to me: diversity, equity, and inclusion, recruiting, professional development, training. And so I've had the great fortune of engaging in all of those things at the firm and being really the first point of contact in our recruiting process. So that's my background, and I look forward to helping you all through this process today.
Thank you, Sandy. And Jeff?
Thanks, Meg. Also, like Sandy, certainly happy to be here. Sort of love the give back, the teaching, mentoring, and those items in addition to my practice, which we might travel into later. I am class of '95, which now that you said it sounds like a long time ago. As you said, I'm now running the local office, and I'm very involved in recruiting at all levels, from incoming to senior to across the footprint. It's a world these days. I'm a transactional lawyer, so that's corporate banking, M&A, venture capital. I'm a deal guy, but like I said, I also sort of do a lot of stuff out in the community there, and sort of excited about the ability to do that because I think it's great to have sort of the real information that you need on the ground. So opportunity to talk.
Thank you both and welcome. And the students are very fortunate to have you today to offer your insights. Let's get started with the actual interview process, if we could. A number of the students, but this will be their first time going through the process and really feeling their way through a multi-stage interview process. So in particular within the legal hiring arena. If you, Sandy, would describe the format for the screening and the callback interview process, that would be, we would appreciate that.
Sure. So very often the first point of contact between a student and an employer, a law firm, or even the government will be a single interviewer in either a Zoom call or a regular telephone call. And that interview is just as important as the follow-up that we're going to discuss later on in this discussion. But one should be completely prepared to discuss your resume, your writing sample, your transcript, your interest. That screening interview is the first point of contact with the firm in which a decision will be made whether to bring you back for what is routinely known as a callback interview, which traditionally is two groups of partners in two, so 4 partners in total and 2 associates. If possible, the associates will take you to lunch, which again is an extension of the interview process. And even though it's a more kind of casual format, it is still part of the interview process if you're taking a lunch or you're taking a coffee or breakfast is provided. So it's really 2 steps. The first step is the first point of contact with the firm, who might be, which might be with someone in my role as a director of recruiting. It could be someone in Jeff's role as a recruiting partner. So very important first touch point to be prepared and ready, and very quickly you will likely know whether you've received a callback for that more fulsome process with 4 partners and 2 associates.
Great, thank you. This season and last season, we've been doing most of our, if not all of our screenings virtually. Are you planning to do that for the most part for this coming season?
Yes, what I'm seeing at the schools is that there is a preference for virtual still this year. So that brings to mind some other things to bear in mind. When you set up virtually, you want to check your technology in advance. You want to log on as early as you can to check those things. You want to check your background. You want to be dressed appropriately. You should prepare as if you are going to be in the room with that first screening call or interview. So everything's got to be as professional as a full-blown interview in person, because all employers are doing this, and you don't want to set yourself apart with a strange background or technology issues, or all things that can be prepared for in advance and thought about as you enter the process.
Yes, yes. Now, in terms of the Albany Law School, let's use that as an example, the Albany Law School interview program, typically the screening is about 20 or it could be 30 minutes in length. If a candidate was to reach out to a firm directly outside of an OCI program, would they expect to see something different in format? So for example, maybe a screening callback, like a combination, right? And not having those 2 visits. Can you talk a little about that maybe?
Sure, I would tell you at least how Phillips Lytle does it. It would be this very same process. And I encourage students to reach out to us outside the OCI process also. You never know why you don't receive an OCI interview, or there are many factors that could maybe prevent you from getting on a schedule. So I can tell you that we see students outside the OCI process all the time, and we run students through the same process that I just described, whether they come to us through OCI or not. So don't give up. I mean, contact law firms that you're interested in, tell them why you're interested in talking to them, and persist, because I do think that many times you'll receive an interview that way and run through the very same process.
Great advice, great advice. For the callback interview, if a student receives an invitation, do you suggest that they respond very quickly and try to get in as quickly as possible on the schedule? Okay.
Yes, Meg, I really do. If you get a call back, number one, the firm will make every effort to call you back quickly, and you should respond the same way. It signals interest, it signals organization and enthusiasm, and many of the traits that Jeff is going to describe in terms of what firms are looking for. So if you get a call back, you don't want to be in a position where somebody from a recruiting office has to contact you twice. You really want to show your interest. And frankly, I tell you to do that even if you aren't really interested in working at that place. It's just good practice that you want to be timely. You want to respond to an invitation right away, set things up, and then take a look at who you're going to meet and start your research on who you're going to meet.
Yes, Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for that information. Jeff, would you be willing to share what happens during the offer and the acceptance stages for us?
I'll probably let Sandy handle it. That's still some on the technical side. I want to talk a little bit more about the
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I would tell you that firms, definitely Phillips Lytle, really tries to move quickly in making a determination as to whether an offer will be extended either for the summer or for permanent employment. And you will hear relatively quickly from probably most employers. I would encourage you to communicate with employers if you have another deadline. It's always useful to point that out. If you haven't heard from a firm, I've heard from a number of students that sometimes firms take a long time. Think about what is reasonable in terms of getting in touch and communicating your interest, and look at the communication that you send and think about what you want to say about your continued interest. But give the employer a reasonable period of time to respond. But I will say, at least on our end, we do respond very quickly. And then you have whatever period of time is set by your school to either accept or decline the offer or ask for more time. So, be thinking in advance of, always be thinking in your head, if I get an offer, what is going to be on me? And that is to really think about your decision within the time frame that you're allotted. If you extend, you're really blocking another student from sort of getting in. So just think about the kind of need to make up your mind, explore your opportunities within reason, so that you can communicate back to an employer whether you accept or decline. But the whole process moves very, very quickly now. So I'd encourage you to give a lot of thought on the front end about where you're applying to and where you want to be.
Thank you, Sandy. Yes. At one point in time, the National Association for Legal Professionals had a stringent timeline for employers, and that no longer exists. And it's really, it has to do really with what's in the best interest for the candidates and the employers working together. So our office, and I encourage students to work directly with their counselor. If they do receive an offer and they're certainly going through the process for the first time to get assistance all the way through, we're happy to help. There is also a student guide to interviewing that will also explain that process and give you that timeline to help guide you through the process. And that is available on your Albany Law Link account. So feel free to ask any questions, and we're happy to help with that.
Yeah, and Meg, I would say most firms now are not giving, it used to be that you had 28 days from the first OCI interview at your school. Many firms now are asking for a response within 2 weeks. So be prepared for that.
Yeah, very, very fast. Thank you for that tip. Thank you. And we've I think covered, Sandy, the difference pretty much between the screening interview and the callback interview. So I feel like we're on good track with that. Jeff, should candidates expect that callback interviews be held in person for the most part?
Yeah, I mean, historically it would have been. Obviously, the last few years are sort of changing the landscape there. If possible, I personally offer that opportunity for reasons we'll get into. Mm-hmm. I think that's just beneficial. It's not a negative if you don't, but I think there's opportunities to make your case a little bit better. But I think we're across the landscape because I think generally the industry is changing to be hybrid, remote, responsive. So it's really to be accommodating. So it could be either. Also we're dealing with people who may not be geographically within the same footprint. So you're getting that given what's going on in the marketplace. So either, neither, both. It's all over there. It's more less on sort of the relevance of that question and more on the stuff we'll sort of get into, sort of the meat of the interview than the process side.
Great, thank you for that. So let's move on to the objective of the interviewer. So Jeff, I'm going to kind of turn this over to you to get your insights. As an interviewer, what are you looking to get from the interview?
So just as a housekeeping note, I know the point of this is demystifying the interview, so I want to get into some of that stuff. Sure. I do a lot of speaking and teaching, and I hate when it's a bait and switch and you're not on topic, so I want to stay on that topic. If you're coming to me and you've been screened by Sandy, We've made the determination that you're bright, you're driven, right? You're going to law school. That's an effort. There's an expense. There's work to be had. So much like when I talk to my clients, me being good at what I do is not a differentiator. There are other people. That's what gets me in the game. So any of these people coming to me, working hard, you're driven, you want to be successful. So it's sort of the above and the beyond. So I can look at a transcript and I can see grades, and those are certainly not irrelevant. But when I was in Albany Law School, I had a handful of professors who had come out of industry, and they said, listen, if you're going to sleep through my class, pay attention to these next 5 minutes, the real world practice pointers. And that's what I want to sort of convey here. So a lot of what I want is I want to get to know the person. And I know a lot of it might sound hokey, but my perspective is I worked in big law. I came out of Albany Law and went to the city. My summer class was 57 summer associates. I came to Albany and worked for a 6-person firm, and now I'm at a 160-person firm. So I have the porridge that's too hot, too cold, and right in there. So I have all the perspectives. So for me, I want to know sort of about the person beyond sort of just the grades. Articulate, confident, eager, driven, willing, sincere. This is not, I don't just need worker bees who I can just hand work to. I want someone I can talk to. In my style, and again, this is sort of just me. I know we're representing the firm, but just you get, because another thing to know is there is a large subjective element to this. Whether someone has a good day or a bad day or things like that. I'll often ask about, outside interests, sports teams. Of course, if they don't align with my interests, that's always going to be a negative, but we can overcome that. But it's beyond sort of what's on the paper. We have, no secret, like every firm, I have a form I fill out when that's done. And we're looking at, poise and comfort and articulate and confidence and eager. And we'll know if people are disingenuous. And I want to know that person because this is someone I'm going to spend time with who, in my mind, I want to be working with me for the next 30 years. Now, I know that's unrealistic for a million reasons, but that's what I'm looking at. I'm not just looking at, can I hire a mover to move my couch? I'm looking at somebody who I can have as a colleague for a long period of time. So I don't want a recitation of stats or grades. I want to know about interests. I want to know about interest in class. I want to know about likes. And I want to see how they compose themselves because they can be dealing with my clients. So I don't want just a technician or just someone who's cool. I would like both. Hope that's helpful. I know it's a long answer to a question, but that's how I roll.
Very helpful. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. So as students are preparing to answer interview questions, thinking along the lines of what you've just offered us, Jeff, what do you feel the candidate should be striving for as they prepare to answer these questions? So kind of thinking about, the characteristics that they possess perhaps, and interjecting a little bit of a story about themselves as they answer questions. Could you maybe talk a little to that based on your experience?
I think from a different perspective, Sandy sort of touched on it, but it's some of the basics are really treating it the way you would classically think to treat it, right? There's preparation, there's reading up about the firm. You're probably not likely to know who will be interviewing you. Maybe at an on-campus you will, but maybe not when you're called back. You may not have an agenda. So it's studying up about the firm. It's certainly having a command of your own materials. I don't want to say, what did you think about, the history of French torts and malpractice, that class that you took, and they say, what? So really, when my 21-year-old son says, I applied for a job, it took me all day, should I apply for another one? I say, yeah, looking for a job is a job. Certainly, be prepared to cover the materials, but it won't be so rigid, but I think there is a place for personality. I understand that that's tricky because you don't want to be sort of outside the box, but, you're human beings, and I think both me personally and the marketplace understands whether it's, as Sandy talked about, diversity, equity, inclusion, whether there's work-life balance. Like, we understand, as much as, Sandy talked about treating it professionally, have the right background, make sure the technology is there. Because you'd be surprised. It's also not the end of the world if your cat runs across the screen. We're all human beings. It's real life. These things happen. There's poise, there's composure. So almost inevitably, my interviews end with, what do you want to know about us? And there aren't canned answers, but At minimum, it's great because a lot of our callbacks are a staggered series of interviews, maybe 2 people for a half hour, 4 of those in a row. So you're getting 4 different opportunities, and at minimum, it's nice to know that we answer them the same, or we answer them differently, and you'll see that, because you are interviewing us as we're interviewing you. I think it's fair to ask those questions. I wouldn't start with, tell me all about your vacation, how many days I get off, but we also understand that that's part of, treating our employees, correctly as well. So you'll get some, people across the landscape, different practice areas, diverse people who poured over your reading sample, and folks who never looked at it. So I think sort of being prepared for the unpreparable, again, maybe not a great answer, but it's no longer, you want to dial up a video from 1980. It's not this, okay, if you were a tree, what would you be, and have great posture. Like, we're sort of human beings, and be professional. We get people who ghost, we get people who don't show up. We spend a lot of time and resources in this, and I think I expect candidates to do the same. So prepared and professional. Hopefully that answers the question. Again, a long answer for a short question.
That's okay. That's very helpful information. Sandy, you're probably the best to answer this question in terms of preparing for the interviews. Do you often know in advance who the candidate will be meeting with before they come for a visit for that callback? Is that probably more often that they would know and have the opportunity to conduct some research in advance?
Yeah, we make an effort to provide the students with the names of the partners and associates who they'll be meeting with. But as Jeff made mention of, you never know if a partner or an associate is going to have a business conflict or personal conflict. So you should definitely read about both the firm, the individuals who you're going to be meeting with. I can't tell you how many times a partner has said to me, I was so impressed, the student came in, knew what I had litigated or what deal I was on, and that level of preparedness will be noticed by interviewers. And so I would really urge you to read a lot about the firm, look at what they're doing in the marketplace, maybe research what litigations they're handling, what's in the news about the firm, and think about what speaks to you. Don't ask a question just because you want to demonstrate that you have read this. Talk about something that you've read that actually speaks to you and resonates with an interest that you have. And then with the individuals who you're going to meet with, same thing. Look, there'll be a lot available when you research these individuals in terms of what they work on, what schools they went to, what their backgrounds are. And it's just a nice way to connect with an interviewer to have this information if it's sort of natural in the conversation to bring it up.
Yes, yes. And students, a lot of you came on a little bit after we got started. Please feel free to ask any questions along the way. Raise your virtual hand. Joanne's monitoring things, or just, simply just chime right in.
One thing I would say with questions, many students have sort of a canned list of questions that they ask everyone. I've been in a lot of OCIs where a student will open a notebook, take out a sheet of paper that has questions that they really ask everyone, such as, is your summer program a rotation? Think about what questions you're going to ask, and don't signal to the interviewer that you just have these canned questions that you may really not care about, but you want to ask a question to show your interest. Rather, think about, what question do you want to ask this particular firm? And give some thought to that, because interviewers get the same questions over and over again, and I don't think you want to be that person asking what 12 people in front of you ask, such as the one I just gave, which is, do you have a rotation? There is a way to ask that a little differently. Maybe you say, will I get a diverse slate of work while I'm at the firm? Will I get to experience all practice groups? That's a little more sophisticated than what I've just said. And a lot of firms have information about their summer programs on their website where you don't need to ask that question. You can learn it from the website.
Right, right. And Jeff, for the question, why this firm, and or why do you want to work in this geographic location? Is that something that, do you find that that's a question that people are to come to you prepared to answer?
Let me answer that, and we have a little bit of sort of the prior thread in here. I will tell you, again, having done big law, having done little law, having done middle law, with that perspective, certainly where I am now is a regional powerhouse, with the footprint across New York and beyond. It's a nice balance of sort of the sophistication of work and lifestyle and a bunch of good things that I think, very attractive, including a really good group of people who are sort of genuine and sincere. And where that ripples through to this audience is, if you're coming out of law school, I understand when I ask you what you've done, the answer isn't, I argued in front of the Supreme Court. But if that's the answer, there's something very odd about you, and that's great. But that's probably not the case. And this gets back to sort of, I guess, candor and honesty, which I know maybe goes without saying, but more and more I have to sort of say what goes without saying because I find common sense is less and less common. Present yourself in the best light that you can, but, I'm going to ask questions. When I get people who've been in the workforce, that's of interest to me, for example. It shows they've been gainfully employed, they've shown up for work, these things. So when I say, what did you do? You do what you did. If you had a summer internship at a law firm and you wrote resolutions, great. But when I say, did you do a mergers and acquisitions transaction, the answer is probably going to be no. So candid about that, because if you get out over your skis, it can sort of be awkward, and it stops the rhythm of an interview. If I identify something in your paperwork and it's more than just massaged, it's created. That's sort of an important thing to keep there, because I think the people on my end we want to talk to you. We want to meet you, whether you come here or go elsewhere. We want to help. I want to help, people in my law school. I'd like to find the best candidates for me, but we're all very much sort of rising tides if you sort of accept that. But you have to sort of come at it in good faith, and you'll see elsewise. So how that dovetails into your question here, that does matter to me in an upstate firm. I was from the downstate area, came up here for law school, went back downstate, very happily up here now. But you should have an answer for that. Now, sometimes the answer may be, hey, I just want a job. And I get that, but that's not always the best received, right? When I'm looking at somebody who I want to join me for a career, if they say, listen, I send out 10 million resumes, whoever hires me, I'm in, that doesn't make me feel they're as committed to me as they can be, even if that's the truth. And I get that. We're not living in a fantasy here. So, for example, in the Phillips Lytle footprint, the Albany office happens to be particularly active in venture capital, startup companies, emerging growth. I mean, the firm is general practice, but we happen to have a robust practice in that here, right? So that would be some sort of obvious fit. Maybe complex litigation might be more Buffalo-centric, banking might be more Rochester-centric. Now, we do it all across the footprints, but these are the types of things I would want to know why or what or where's the fit. If you're coming to me and you're looking to do something we don't do, well, that makes me think, aside from it's not going to work, that you didn't do the work to find that out. So you should be prepared for that. It's more an issue of prep than actually sort of mattering in some respects, because the industry is hybrid, remote, less so for junior lawyers, to be clear. I think as you're starting your career, geography might matter, a presence in the office might matter. It's different than you've been practicing for 20 years and you're going to work out of your home office there. So I think you need to have a geographic answer. And it may not matter to you, and that's fine. You say, I want a firm with that reputation and that quality of work, but it does come up, especially not just at Phillips Lytle, but if there's a disconnect between the where you are and the where they are. You're going to Albany Law School and you say, I've always wanted to work in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. They're going to say, why is that? You should have an answer, or else it's probably going to be, something you have to overcome.
Thank you. I think oftentimes, and Joanne, you probably could, nod and agree to this, but oftentimes students will be wondering if they should know what practice area they have an interest in when they're heading into an interview for a summer associate position. So could either of you speak to that?
It's interesting. I would say as a third year going into the interview process, at that point, you probably do have an idea of the area of practice that you want to pursue. This is a tricky question for summer and even arguably for a permanent position. You want to be honest. You want to be who you are. If you do have a particular interest that you really want to pursue, you are served by letting an interviewer know that that's what you're looking for. If you do that, understand if the firm doesn't have an entry level or a summer position that is dedicated to that area of practice, you may take yourself out of the running, but arguably, if that's what you really want to do, then it isn't a fit. On the summer side, I've had a lot of students say to me, right now, I've enjoyed every class. Real estate looks interesting to me, for example, but I have an open mind and I'm eager to try many different practice areas. If that's true for you, that's a response. I think you really have to give it thought. And if you are going to highlight a specific practice area, make sure the firm that you're interviewing with actually engages in that practice, because you don't want to be talking to a firm that doesn't. And I think at the summer level, I think it becomes a little harder for prospective employers to say, this person is only interested in a very niche practice, and, are we going to devote one summer spot to somebody who wants something small? So I'd kind of encourage you, if it's honest, to talk in broader terms about interests and state your interest in a way that doesn't kind of peg you into a very small space. Jeff, do you agree with that?
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting question and topic. So I sort of have a decades-long dialogue with the law schools generally. Are we a profession or are we a business? Right? A little bit of both. I'm in business, in a profession. So on the one hand, the idea of just turning out educable minds is an interesting concept, but then we need actual practitioners. But let's now, again, to get into the reality of this discussion topic and demystifying the interview process, if you're interviewing for a second-year summer job, you've had 1/3 of your law school career. You're sort of interviewing based on a year of law school, maybe a year and a half, right? So, and if the first year is largely mandatory classes, how much discretion do you have over what you want to do? Right? So, as Sandy said, if you have a preference, that's certainly of interest. In that spot, I like the educable mind. I want somebody who is diligent, personable, willing to take on challenges, dedicated, earnest. And if they want to try different things, I think that's something I'll entertain that to see where they think the best fit is, because I also did a rotation back in my day many, many days ago. And it was clear what I wanted to do and didn't want to do, and that was a helpful exercise. I do think, again, consistent with the bringing candor to the process, if you've taken 7 classes in complex litigation, and then you come to me and say, I want to be an immigration lawyer, I'm like, can you explain why that is? Similarly, if you have, a particular focus in your last work experience, I was city planner of whatever for 5 years. Now I want to do tax. Not at all a non-starter, but it's going to come up just because you've been down a path and either you're pivoting or not. So I think if you don't know what you want to do, it's also great to have some things that you do want to try. Because we do like that. I mean, look, at the end of the day, whoever the best candidate is, however you quantify that, whether it's grades, personality, experience, whatever that combination is, that person still has to be trained in the real world by the law firm they're going to do real world stuff. So if you have an interest, we love, even within my firm now, people who work for me now, if they say, hey, I want to try, I'm interested in cannabis, I'm interested in unmanned aerial vehicles, well, okay, great, let's see how to go about that. There's some learning, there's training, there's growth. So you don't have to have it, but I think you have to have thought about it.
I think, Meg, you're on mute.
Thank you very much. I was leaving it off for a bit and I thought I had some noise in the background. If anyone has any questions right now, please feel free to ask. Does anyone want to chime in with any questions before we continue? So one of the things that I wanted to mention, go ahead, Daniela.
Hello, thank you so much for every speakers here today for hosting this event. I'm an international student and I'm also an East Asian woman. And I know there are a lot of movements here at the law firms to launch these diversity programs to hire more diverse background students. But I wonder if you guys have any advice in particular to those students who come from a backgrounds that are not traditionally selected as a associate positions usually.
My advice to you would be no different than everything else that we're setting forth. We have at the firm a very large number of international students who we interview and then ultimately are here at the firm. In fact, one of the things we now offer, we have in-house immigration capacity where that's needed. So I would encourage you not to think of yourself as any different than any other applicant, because you are not. And I would encourage you to prepare the same way and pursue what interests you the same way, because the opportunities will be there.
Thank you.
Sure. Anybody else have any questions for us?
One of the things I wanted to mention too, kind of backtracking a little bit here on the preparing part for the interview process, to remember, for students to remember that they are always welcome to do some outreach to some graduates who might be currently with the firm that they're interviewing with, just to get some insight as to the environment there and as they prepare. So if you are selected to interview with any employer, please feel free to work with your career counselor. They can help you, connect you with graduates who will be more than happy to help you.
And Meg, let me amplify on that. Very often we will have students who do that, and the lawyer who you reach out to will actually contact me and talk to me about your conversation and what you asked about and how you came across. So think of that as an extension of the interview, and I think it's a great idea to connect. It shows real enthusiasm and interest and initiative. And so it's a great way to learn about the firm and get good feedback to the people who are going to be interviewing you in the more formal process.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you, Sandy. Asta?
Hello, my name is Asta Kataki. I'm a rising 3L, well, a 3L now. So I just wanted to ask, so in your career and over like different firms, are there certain classes that have like played a transferable skills role, like administrative law? Like, is that something I should take in this year or like my last semester that'll help me in any field that I go to? Thank you.
It's a great question. I would tell you to keep challenging yourself. I would not, I don't know what Jeff, I would not fall into taking easier classes in the third year. You're in 3 years of just an incredible opportunity to learn. And so I think taking some of the more rigorous classes, even in the third year, will serve you depending upon what you do. I think administrative law is a great example that you raised. That will come up time and again through your career. It has for mine as a litigator, probably less so for Jeff, but maybe so. So I would really continue to take, tax and business, and it's not easy, and arguably you kind of want to let up on yourself, but it's only 3 years of this and you won't be able to go back to it. So why not learn as much about the commercial world as you can while you're in school, in my view. Jeff, do you agree with me?
Yeah, it's interesting. I happen to know going into law school, I took a couple of years off after college, worked, and I have an older brother who's also a transactional lawyer, and I knew I was going to be a transactional attorney. The only thing remotely related to being in a courtroom at school was whatever they compelled, moot court. I mean, there was no place for me there. So I had a very heavy focus on business and transactional classes. That being said, I imagine it's still even the case. You take a year of contracts and you actually work on, I believe, 0 contracts. You read cases about failed contracts. So the way the education kind of crosses over, as a deal guy, I'm touching on tax, real estate, environmental. I mean, I have subject matter experts that do the heavy lifting for me, but there's a lot of value in sort of a broad education. So I think unless you really have a focus and you want to say, I'm going to take all the intellectual property classes I can because I'm an engineer and going to be an IP lawyer, which is fine. Other than that, I think there's some value in sort of the breadth and getting exposure and familiarity, because again, it's the profession versus the business thing. There is a piece of me that I love somebody seasoned, ready to hit the ground, but an educable, bright mind who can navigate problems, right? We're problem solvers. Our clients come to us with pain and we alleviate it. That's the law business. I just saved you a whole lot of time. So that's what we do. So being able to navigate, whether it's regulatory schemes or, contracts. So, after a long answer to a short question, it's not that I see a class and I say, oh, if this person took that class, wow, they're really going for it. But maybe a nice breadth, that they have a whole, a big bandwidth of skills, or a focus where they clearly wanted that focus. So I think the answer is it should be something based on your contemplating maybe how you see it unfold. Hope that helps.
Thank you. That really helps. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you.
Sure.
Thinking about after the interview process and things are wrapping up, Jeff, I'm just wondering on your end, if you could give us, I know I would love to hear a little bit more about what happens on the other side with the hiring committee. If you could give us sort of a look at that process on your end.
Well, again, so I'll probably kick some of that to Sandy, but let me tell you again, back to my mantra of what do people really need to know? You should know that if you do have an interview and you meet, 2 people for half an hour times 4, and there's 8 of us, if I get an email that says, "Dear Mr. Schwartz, thank you for your time. It was so nice to meet you," I'm going to, a nanosecond later, check with my colleagues. And if 8 of us got the same thing, and half of them all, 3 of them probably say, "Dear Mr. Schwartz," even though they went to somebody else, that's not going to sit well with me. I don't know that I need the follow-up. You can go back to your upbringing. Do you send thank you notes for every present you ever got? I'll defer to you. I can't tell you one is yay or nay. But if you're going to do that, maybe something we spoke about specifically would resonate more with me, because I know my style is different than some of my colleagues, and I might say, are you a Mets fan or a Rangers fan or Yankee? Something, right, that I know you were engaged and not just, as Sandy said, going through your check the box. So that's one. We're not formal committee, and maybe Sandy could speak more to that, but we certainly, everyone who interviews, we have a form, we sort of fill out those forms and they get aggregated. And I can't even, Sandy, you can speak to it. It's not a points scoring, but obviously like anybody else, there's a series of metrics that we sort of look into. And as I said, there are some subjective components. So it's awesome when everything aligns and there's a universal agreement. I don't know if that happens all the time. Sandy, maybe you could actually talk.
Yeah, I mean, in our process, there are a lot of people involved in our hiring decisions. Certainly everyone you met with is going to have a voice in our hiring decisions. And ultimately, even our managing partner will have a role in our hiring decisions. So there's a lot of people involved, a lot of different perspectives. Jeff's advice on the thank you note is really key, because even if the interviewers are not talking to one another about what they got, they will all forward your email to me. And if I see the same email 8 times, or sometimes I see cut and pastes and all kinds of things, it's not worth it to send that kind of note. If that's what you're going to do, don't do it at all. But it is really a nice touch if you can refer to something that was discussed. And so, again, to give you kind of the innards of our process, everybody who you meet with will have an equal voice, at least here. And ultimately, our managing partner is going to look at all of your materials, all of the feedback, confer with me and others so that the decision is made. So at each step of the way, you want to be presenting your most prepared and true self. I mean, I tell our summer associates at the start of the summer to enjoy being here and be themselves. And I think when you go into an interview, it is really important to be yourself, and don't feel like you have to walk in with a briefcase that if you opened it, it's actually empty. Be who you are, because employers will see that, and that's sort of the tenor of what Jeff has been communicating as well.
Great, thank you so much. So just in the interest of time, are there any last minute questions that the students may have? Okay.
I can give you another tip.
Sure, go
I
ahead.
would not bring food or beverage into an interview. I've had students come in and like open a can of Coke, and I'm thinking, you're going to be out of here in 20 minutes. You could wait. So, think about that. It's amazing how many people bring food in. Don't look at your phone. Or if there's something sensitive going on and you have to look at your phone, at least explain that. Keep your whole focus on the interview and, avoid those outside things. It's amazing how often those things come into play. And I'm not saying you're not going to get an offer here if you come in with a bag of chips, but there will be a feeling of you could have waited 20 minutes and opened the chips.
Great tip. Great tip. Thank you. Thank you. Asta, did you have another question?
Yes, just a quick one for informational interviews. So in navigating informational interviews, what's the appropriate time to be like, oh, I really want to be working for your firm, but not be so direct that, hey, I want a job. So
Right.
I would just like to know how to navigate that, I guess. Thank you.
So that's a great question. Here's what I would tell you. Participate in the informational interview, get the information, ask your questions, and then think about it, and then write an email describing how what you heard in the informational interview has confirmed your interest in pursuing a job and why. I wouldn't do it I do a lot of informational interviews, by the way. What I look for again in that context is someone who's prepared, who really has genuine questions about the firm, and then thinks about what I've said and then comes back to me with why it's a fit or what they liked about what I've said. And I think it's a great approach. So I would not dismiss an informational interview as something that can't lead to a job. Quite often it can and will. Another great question.
Great question.
Thank you.
Well, all right. Is there anything else that Sandy or Jeff that you'd like to add?
I'll just say, and maybe it's right for the end of this and right based on that last question. So for example, when you're coming to either our informational or our interview, no secret, we know you're looking for jobs and we're looking for employees, right? So there's not, much like when I talk to my clients and I send them bills, there's no secret I'm making money. That's what I do for a living. So it's okay. It sort of gets back to understanding, the relationship of the parties and the value proposition. And where this goes, Meg, is people are generally receptive. I mean, yes, I have, kids I have to juggle. I have clients who are going to take precedence because that's my job. But, I'll find the time if people reach out to me, and I sort of appreciate that. And again, there may not be a fit, but there may be tips, or, it may not be a fit for me. I will tell you, I have a number of colleagues outside the firm in the area, and all the time, especially in this market, they say, listen, any candidate you looked at that you said no to, can I see? Now, I may have said no because they're not good, in which case that's a different issue, but wrong fit, wrong timing, wrong whatever. I'm like, these are good people. There's no home for them here. But I'll send that to some folks because I want them to be gainfully employed for a bunch of reasons, for them, for my friend, for maybe they get trained there and then they come here and then I thank my friend for training a lawyer. There's all sorts of things, but so there's an appreciation of sort of a willingness to take your future sort of by the scruff of the neck and sort of manage it. So, I wouldn't say in the interview, if I say any questions, your answer isn't, hey, when do I start? That's a little over the line. But you can reach out. I'll have that time. We'll have the conversation. I'll give you your tips. I've had colleagues who, candidates reach out and they say, again, what classes should I take? What books can I read? What can I do to better myself as a candidate? Not as a human being, that's above my pay grade, but, what can I do to separate myself and differentiate and show that I'm taking the steps to be an attractive hire for you? People are receptive. People sort of want to help if you're genuine. That's, so. Advocate for yourself. You're learning to be advocates.
That's right. That's great. That's great advice. And like you're saying too, Jeff, you never know where that's going to go. That candidate will be in your mind when you're having a conversation with a colleague. You may think of this person and perhaps they're a good fit, and you'll pass along that information. So you just never know. So to really keep that as a tool for yourself and use that tool throughout the whole process. And don't be afraid to conduct the informational interviews, for sure. So, okay, well.
Thank you, Jeff and Sandra. Appreciate the
It's a
information.
pleasure. And I know I speak for Jeff. We hope to see your applications in the not too distant future. And we're excited to be on campus in Albany and to get as many applications as possible. We really hope to see all of you.
Thank you both. Once again, I'd like to thank you for spending time with us today. Your insights were just invaluable, and it just will really be beneficial to our students. And we'll be sending this link out to the students following the program. And we really appreciate your support.
Thank you.
Great, thanks for the chance.
Thank you.
Bye all.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Pleasure.
Take care.